Hey guys, it's M4J here and welcome back to the Majeffries Network here on OpenTTD. Now today we are working on the Realism initiative, part 4 I think this is, and we are working on the lines out of Gardcity St. John, so in other words the Gardcity Great Eastern Network. Now this is probably the biggest challenge of the Gardcity stations, mainly because GSJ, the lines in and out of GSJ were so densely packed in amongst all of the buildings and the roads and the river that already existed within Gardcity. Therefore it made it very, very difficult to build the lines in and out. So what I've done for the time being at least is kept the original lines as they are. There aren't actually that many train movements in and out of GSJ at the moment, even with the new branch off to the north. There aren't that many train movements, not enough at least to warrant a complete rebuild of the station. However, there was plenty of work needing to be done on the line itself, the main line. So here's a good example, just straightening some of the line a bit more to increase line speeds at certain points. I might go back and redo GSJ. I might go back. I think that the biggest problem I had was I want to keep the sidings that store trains, because it means you can get more trains in and out of the platforms at any one time. But to keep the sidings and then to rebuild the station, I could only do one or the other. I couldn't do both, because the land that the sidings currently sit on would be the land where the new lines would be built. So I think being able to have trains leave the platform to go into the sidings and then back to the platform to load up and then head out, that should cancel out the lack of additional lines in and out of the station. Plus it's a relatively straightforward approach to the station anyway, so trains will all be travelling at pretty much the same speed, so it shouldn't be too big an issue. Right, the next thing I wanted to talk about, I wanted to answer a couple of questions that people had on Monday's episode. I won't read out who asked the questions, I'll just read out the questions. So there was a question about franchises. Now you remember on the last map, if you wanted a franchise you've got one pretty much. That's not the case anymore. Let me go onto my Patreon page and I'll be able to tell you in more detail exactly what the brackets are. So the question was, could they have a franchise? That was the question. Actually, I'll come back to that in just a second. I'll talk to you about what I'm doing on screen now. So Heninghall Junction. This is part of the adding additional platforms to stations initiative, which is part of RI. And I realised that Heninghall actually needed a major remodel, because the train flow in and out of Heninghall was particularly bad. 3 lines converging into one station that only had 4 platforms, 2 in each direction, wasn't particularly efficient. So there have been 2 new platforms added on the western side. All of the western platforms have now been transferred over to slow, local, stopping, whatever you want to call them, services. The fast tracks, there is another platform that has been added onto the east side, which you'll see me add a little bit later on in the episode. And that means that all the fast trains actually diverge off of the main line and go into the stopping, well, the platforms for the express services. That means that there are 2 lines through the middle still that will be used by trains that do not stop at Heninghall, of which there will be some still. There will be a massive revamp, I think I mentioned this before actually, of the cross-country services as well, that will end up coming through Heninghall and off in different directions. I've also set it up so that Heninghall can be worked as a terminating station on the slow lines and the fast lines. So there's lots and lots of cool stuff that's going on there now. I'm trying to find what page I'm looking for on Patreon. So the question was about franchises. And like I said, in the last map, if anyone wanted a franchise, they could have it, essentially. Unfortunately, it got a bit out of control. Loads of people wanted franchises. I've just noticed something a bit weird on my Patreon. I might have to change that. Loads of people wanted franchises, first and foremost. And then some people that did get franchises took it too seriously, I think is the right expression. Basically, it was supposed to be a bit of fun. It was supposed to be a way for you guys to get your names into the game. So if one person had a franchise, They named it whatever they wanted to name it. They got to choose what livery the trains carried, and that was pretty much it. That was supposed to be the plan. Like I said, it got a bit out of control, and eventually people started sending me maps. They wanted me to rebuild the network to suit what they wanted. They wanted me to change the timetabling, and you know, it just got so messy. I think at one point it was almost a daily thing. Bearing in mind I'm a university student, I was trying to go to the lectures and focus on my studies, and I was getting bombarded with emails with PNG files and spreadsheets, and just at one point, like there was one I got sent. Again, I don't want to name names. I don't want people to feel like I'm victimizing them or anything, but there was one point where I just got sent this timetable of when electrification works needed to be completed on their line, and I just thought, hang on a minute. In the real world, Network Rail build the electrification schemes, not the franchise holders. It's kind of like, well, it's a franchise. That's the easiest way of saying it. It's a franchise. You control what trains you run, but you still have to do it within government guidelines. You control, but you don't even control fares, I don't think. Franchises, they just run the trains and try to run them on time. That's it. And that's what I wanted the franchising scheme to be. So now we have, now I have come up with a series of tiers on Patreon to counter this. And my argument, I mean, it might sound like I'm just trying to grab money, and I suppose in some ways I am, but really, in order to get what people want in their franchises, it takes time. And I spend a good few hours per episode at the moment in this series. And considering how much work I've had to do this year and all the other stuff that's gone on, most people would just stop making videos throughout that time. I want to keep making videos because, you know, I made a commitment. When I started my channel, I made a commitment that I would make videos, release them at a certain time, on a certain day, every single week. And so far, I've done a pretty good job of keeping to that commitment, and I intend to carry on keeping to that commitment as well. But it takes time. So, like a job, when you work for a living, you get paid for your time. You get paid for your time, you get paid for your effort. And that's what my Patreon page is all about. So, the lowest tier is $5 a month. And if you're a fan of the OpenTTD series, the Jeffries network, you can have a branch line named in your honor, or a name of your choosing within reason. That's the basic level, M4J basic. Then you've got M4J intermediate. If you give $10 a month, and it has to be, I might make it so that you don't just put one-time payment and you can rename a line and then you stop paying, because that seems a bit stupid. Let's say after 3 months, if you're still a patron, at $10 a month, you can name or rename a mainline route. So some of the arterial routes, so the Western Reaches, the Great Western, the Great Eastern, the Great Northern, and the Great Southern, they will remain as they are. But for example, the main route between Fort Flonwood and Sannington, where it links up with the Great Western line, you can name that route in your honour. Or between Fort Flonwood and Cadingbury Junction, you can name that line in your honour. Whatever it might be. Intermediate Plus, you can have you can name or rename a mainline route as well. That's $15 per month. I might add an extra. Oh yeah, that's the other thing. You can have a section of. Now it was going to be Gardcity, but I think since Bar City now exists, you can have a section of Bar City named after you as well. So one of the little towns that makes up the main city. Then there's M4J Silver, which is $20 a month. With that, you can have a mainline route named in your honour, and you can name a small franchise. So, let me think. Maybe an open access type franchise. Which, I mean, in the real world, they're not franchises, but in the Jeffries network, they will be. So, for example, the Great Central. Actually, that's quite a big one. Let me think of another good example. Basically, not one that necessarily runs every service on the line, but works on an open access basis. Essentially, that's kind of what I'm offering there. and there's some other stuff. I mean, these all come with other stuff as well, don't get me wrong, it's not just OpenTTD, but I'm specifically making it about OpenTTD because this is the series you're watching. Then M4J Gold, which is $50 per month. You can have a mainline route named, any mainline route. You can also name a medium-sized franchise, and you can have an area of Bar City, as you can with the 20. I should have said that as well. You can have an area of Bar City named after you. And then Excelsior, which is the top range. You can have a mainline route named in your honor. You can also name any unclaimed franchise. So any of the franchises on the map that are unclaimed, you may have. So if it's all the services running out of GSJ up on the Great Northern Line, you can claim it. The suburban services or the express, you can't have both because they're separate franchises. So any franchise. You will also have an area of Bar City. I really need to update it with all of those. And then if you're a fan of Football Manager and things like that, you have all the perks there as well. That's how it's going to be from now on. And it is literally, you are buying my time, because it takes a lot of time. It doesn't take a lot of time to just change the franchise name, because I can do that on the train list. That's no problem. But if you then want to rebuild stations, or if you want to increase service frequencies or introduce whole new services to those franchises, that's where the time comes from. Slightly less time now with the automate feature on the timetable window, but it is still time. So that's why it has to be done through Patreon now, because I tried doing it for free and it worked for a while, and then, as I say, it got way out of control. So hopefully that answers that question. If anyone does have any more queries about that, feel free to put them in the comment section, and it's entirely optional as well. No one has to support me on Patreon if they don't want to, but if you do want any of those perks that I just mentioned, you do have to support me on Patreon, I'm afraid. And it is, as I say, buying my time. The next question was about, do I have the towns can build roads setting on? Yes, I do. Towns can build their own roads, they can't build level crossings. The reason I turned off the level crossings one is because towns were just building random level crossings here, there and everywhere, and it didn't look right. It looked a bit weird. Oh, what you're seeing on the screen here as well, by the way, is I added an additional platform to this station, which I can't remember the name of. So now this station can also have terminating services. I think I rebuilt this station like 2 or 3 times before I finally settled on something I was actually happy with. So yeah, towns can build roads, they can't build level crossings. There was a follow-up question to that, which is why do I let them build roads? The towns building level crossings are disabled due to it being unrealistic, especially since you're doing RI. Yes, that's exactly why. So in real life, Network Rail don't build roads. They might build access roads to certain rail projects, but they're normally dirt tracks and they're normally like grassed over when the work is finished. They don't build full-on roads. They're not National Highways Agency. So I have it so that the towns build the roads on my behalf. If I do want to build roads, like I built the motorways around the outside of Gardcity, I'll do that. I have no problem doing that, because the game won't build roads like that. You have to build them yourself. But when it comes to inside the towns, a really good example actually is St. Elizabeth in Gardcity. It's actually, I think it's just called Elizabeth, the area, but it's actually a full-on city now. It's been a while since I went back there, but because we've been running regular services on the City Connects franchise, the city's grown. It's full size now. All that green area that was around the station is now all covered by towns, and that's why I have towns can build roads switched on, because I don't really want to go around building all these individual roads myself, because it takes time. And again, it comes down to time. So I might as well let the game do it for me. And what that then means is I can go off to Bar City and work on some projects there for a few episodes, come back to Gardcity and the city's even bigger than when I left it, all because of the road building is switched on. So the towns expand by building roads first, and they build buildings either side of the road, and then the road will extend a bit further and more buildings will spring up, and so on and so on and so on. So that's why I did it that way, because it's just easier. And it's realistic. It's actually very unrealistic. Very unrealistic, sorry. It's very realistic that that's the way it goes. Oh yeah, here I'm Drenninghead East and West. This is actually East that I'm rebuilding. Again, to have terminating services in either of the stopping platforms. So I built crossovers at either side. And yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. So yeah, Network Rail don't build roads. National Highways Agency build roads, or local councils build roads. So I don't control the National Highways Agency in this game. I'm basically, I mean, you can build roads, you can build docks and all that kind of thing, but really I'm all about rail. I might build docks and airports and stuff when it's necessary, but given the choice, I'll always choose rail. Therefore, this is a rail-based scenario. So I like letting the towns build themselves. Hopefully that answers the question. I was a bit abrupt, shall I say, in answering these questions in the comments. Mostly because I was quite busy at the time they came through, which is not your fault, by the way. The two people who left those comments, not your fault, I'm busy. But I wanted to answer the questions as quickly as possible so I could get back to what it was I was doing. So I do apologise if I came across a bit abrupt in those responses. But yeah, hopefully I've answered your questions a bit better in this episode, with a bit more time to think about it as well. So yeah, really all that's left for me to say about it is, like I said just now, if you want to have a franchise, or if you want to have a route named, or anything like that, part of Gardcity, Patreon, head over there. Assuming I've got it all set up correctly. I'm not that experienced with Patreon. I know it works because people do support me on there. But hopefully the tier system is set up so you can quite clearly see where it is down the side. It's on the right hand side of the main page when you go on my my Patreon page. There's also some videos on there. For some reason they haven't updated it in quite a while. Since 2015 actually. And they're updating quite regularly before then, so I'm not quite sure what happened there. But yeah, support me on Patreon if you want all that stuff named after you, or if you want a franchise. I've answered the question about roads, and besides that, there's not really left to say. There's not really much left to say. I can't speak. I don't know what it is about my voice at the moment. I can speak perfectly face to face with people. It used to be the opposite. I don't know what's happened there. So I might as well just tell you what's going on in the rest of the video now, since there's nothing left to answer in the questions. I don't think there's any more questions, not on this subject anyway. I mentioned channels in the last episode, so that is coming in the next patch release. Oh yeah, spam channels as well. I might as well put that. I mean, they won't be watching this far in the video anyway, but if you're a spam channel and you know who you are, don't give me comments in the videos saying things like, oh, you've got really good potential, here's the way I got loads of views, because I know it's bull. You know it's bull. We all know it's bull. It's better, again, just to save your time and not bother, because I'll just call you out on it. I'm quite happy doing that. I know a con when I see a con. But besides that, this is me doing some more building work on Waypoint, just south of Dendstone, Carnegie. One of the things the Realism initiative has really highlighted for me is how badly I built some of these initial routes and how much of a rebuild they required. So you notice even in this episode I've been moving tunnels, I've been rebuilding curves, all that kind of thing. It's a mess, but I'm happy to say it's pretty much done on this route. Great Northern, it's done. Great Western, it's been done. I have already recorded the Western Reaches line, which is the most difficult one I've had to do so far. I actually thought GSJ would be, because, as I say, we're trying to rebuild the station, but deciding to not rebuild the station saved me a lot of time and effort there. The Western Reaches line is a massive pain because of Sonnington up in the northwest corner, which you will see next episode gets a total rebuild and looks very, very different now. The actual station remains the same, but the lines in and out of it look very, very different to how they did before that episode was recorded. And also Sandley gets a little bit of a rebuild as well to complement what we'd already done. And then it just gets even more challenging, really, because next week, so today's Friday when you're watching this, next week we've got Gronwell. So we've got the Western Reaches line, then I've got to rebuild Gronwell, and then I'm going to go back to stations like Beffingway and turn all the old terminus platforms into more through platforms. So there's a lot of work to do, but I said I would do it. It's the biggest project I've done on this series so far, and everyone seems engaged with it still. So I'll crack on and keep doing it. So that's the end of this episode. Like I said, next episode on Monday will be the Western Reaches line. So until then, thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and of course if you enjoyed the series. Drop some comments down below with ideas for future episodes. Also, if you have any questions about stuff I've talked about in today's episode, feel free to ask. I'm pretty free over the weekends at the moment, so I won't be as thorny in the response. If you want to see about the tiers in more detail, but you don't necessarily want to commit money on Patreon, that's absolutely fine. You can still head over there and read the tier system in more detail, see if there's anything there that does pique your interest. Whether it does or not, that's absolutely fine. But apart from that, if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, be sure to hit the subscribe button. If you have already subscribed to the channel, thank you guys for your continued support. And until next time, I will see you soon.